So, first we can look at one reason that accumulated toxins become so dangerous is that because when they become concentrated in successive trophic levels of a food web, a phenomenon happens called biological magnification. So this occurs because the biomass from any given trophic level is produced from a much larger biomass of that previous level. So obviously, if you have a bird, it's going to be eating worms usually, and those worms are going to be much larger in population than that bird population. So in turn, that bird is going to be intaking lots more of these toxins than those worms are because it has to feed off many of these worms. So that's what we call biological magnification. And top-level carnivores, like birds, are most often affected because they receive the highest concentration of these toxins. Chlorinated hydrocarbons are a class of industrial synthesized compounds that have demonstrated biological magnification. More specifically and infamously is DDT. Rachel Carlson wrote a book called Silent Spring, which brought upon the famousness of DDT, or infamousness. And it was originally used as an insecticide. However, it led to the drastic drops in bird populations just through the effects of like what we've been talking before about runoff and these things that we don't see until many years later. Next we can look at greenhouse gases and climate change. So gaseous waste products produced by humans take a toll on the atmosphere, and this is namely carbon dioxide. So what's up with carbon dioxide is that the concentration in the environment of carbon dioxide has been increasing, and I wish I could say steadily, but it's been increasing at higher rates. And that's directly increased to the increase in global temperature. So CO2 and several other gases absorb infrared radiation that's produced by the Earth, and instead of normally sending it out into space, reflect it back into the Earth, gradually increasing its temperature. We call this the greenhouse effect. Fossil fuels also have an effect, and temperature change can radically alter the biosphere. Many plant species are shown not to survive when a temperature is changed drastically, which it is doing right now. Many organisms won't be able to survive either beyond plants, and this is why scientists are so concerned, and they're considering something called assisted migration, which is the idea of translocating a species somewhere where it would never normally go, but is inherently advantageous to live there, and it would be separated from human hazards. Lastly, in terms of climate change, we can be looking towards solutions. And here's a few solutions, however, it's much more broad than this. First, we can look at using energy more efficiently. That's stuff like turning off your lights when you go to bed or when you leave the house, and doing all these other things that are just mindful of how much energy you have to spend and how much energy you want your future generations to have. Secondly, we can look at replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy, such as wind power and solar power. And this is highly advantageous because it releases the amount of CO2 emissions as well, and is in turn more efficient. Next, we can reduce deforestation, particularly in the tropic areas. Here's an example of deforestation and just how drastic it can get. This is a big one because deforestation accounts for 10% of greenhouse gas emissions and has several other consequences within those environments that especially tropic areas hold when they're just deforested. Many habitats are destroyed and more consequences evolve from that. So next we can look at the depletion of atmospheric ozone. And this is also because of human activities. Shocker, atmospheric ozone has decreased. We can look here just how much between 1979 and 2008. A huge ozone hole has developed. The problem with this is that ozone protects life from solar radiation. The ozone layer has thinned, and especially around Antarctica, which is this area right here. There's literally a hole over Antarctica. Thankfully, countries have stepped in rather quickly to respond, but more help is needed because, well, this is 2020 and the hole has shrunk and gotten less thin. It's still there, and it's not really showing any signs of completely disappearing. So, lastly, we can look at key concept 5. Sustainable development can improve human lives while conserving biodiversity. And so we're going to be looking at sustainable development as a solution, really, as our resources dwindle, but we still have to face the difficulty of how to provide for our future generations and also trying to maintain the nature that we know and love. And next we can look at the future of the biosphere. So firstly, let's talk about sustainable development. And essentially what this is development that meets the needs of the people without cutting resources from future generations. Many countries have already embraced this, however, it's not worldwide. We can look at sustainable development in Costa Rica as a prime example of how it helps. So, in Costa Rica, it has been an overwhelming success. However, it required cooperation from both the national government and non-governmental organizations. Nature reserves were established and they were respected by the government and also given massive tax breaks in order to stay sustained. And then, because of other sustainable development efforts, including these nature reserves, living conditions started to improve in Costa Rica. Most notably, we can look at infant mortality decreasing and life expectancy skyrocketing very sharply. So, development in Costa Rica has helped both the people and nature, and many scientists think that it can do the same for other countries and should be implemented worldwide. Nextly, we can look at the future of the biosphere. We as humans appreciate the biosphere. That has been evident since the dawn of time. I mean, we have cave paintings of just animals and in their beauty and our fascination. We evolved with these creatures, we evolved in these habitats, and as such, we grew an affinity for them. So obviously, we're going to want to take care of them. And that's why it's so important to be thinking about the future of the biosphere. Because right now, our habits and our activities, especially in developed countries, are incredibly toxic towards the future of these animals and the future of these habitats. So, modern humans live very differently from ancient ones, and we bring upon those risks because of that. However, we still have that same love for the biosphere. We still have that same affinity. So, what we need to do is we need to rise to the challenge that we need to preserve this biosphere that we love. However, we need to do that in such a way that it doesn't destroy our ways of advancing, and our ways of advancing don't destroy it. So, in turn, biology will be a very useful tool for this endeavor.